System theory is a versatile and interdisciplinary field that examines systems, their elements, interactions, and their behavior or outcomes. It is not confined to any specific domain, but rather spans across various disciplines, including but not limited to engineering, biology, sociology, ecology, psychology, management, computer science, economics, and most importantly for our case, conflict transformation. In essence, system theory provides a framework for understanding the similarities and common principles among different systems, regardless of their specific field, fostering a holistic approach to analyzing and solving problems. Arts and culture play crucial roles in conflict transformation. They serve as mediums for expressing grievances, fostering empathy, promoting dialogue, and transcending boundaries. Whether through storytelling, music, visual art, or performance, they can facilitate healing, reconciliation, and understanding among conflict groups by humanizing the other and fostering a shared sense of humanity. Artistic expressions are often carry emotional weight and depth, allowing individuals and communities to connect on a deeper level, transcending language and cultural barriers. Through storytelling or visual representation, they can help people understand diverse perspectives, challenge stereotypes, and promote empathy, essential elements in transforming conflicts. Efforts to integrate arts, culture, and conflict transformation often involve community engagement, grassroots initiatives, and the support of artists and cultural practitioners to foster space. Now, having said all that, Polly, why did you think it was important to create a new tool for the ASCCT field that explains systems theory?
Kiche, over the past 18 years of working in the ACT field, I've experienced a gap in communication between policymakers and funders and artists and cultural workers. I also noticed that although the arts and cultural work have greatly informed conflict transformation during this period of time, less knowledge from the field of conflict transformation has been shared with artists and cultural workers. And my intent in creating this tool was to share systems theory research that indicates a systems-based approach enhances endeavors that are designed to address intractable conflicts. And what we mean by intractable conflicts, I'll draw on the work of Dr. Peter Coleman, who characterizes intractable conflicts as having high levels of violence and harm, multiple elements that exacerbate each other, keeping the conflict in place for long and painful periods of time. They're also characterized by very complex aspects that tend to be portrayed in simplistic, polarized ways, as well as by failure to respond to mediation, negotiation, or other problem-solving processes. Systems-based approaches are designed to address these characteristics of intractable conflicts, such as war, racism, colonialism. We see many elements of a systems-based approach to conflict transformation in the work of the artists and the cultural workers in the Acting Together anthologies and documentary. This new tool that I've developed for the Acting Together Toolkit is designed to give a brief introduction to systems theory and then to ground this approach in practice examples drawn from the creative, courageous, and skilled artists and cultural workers featured in Acting Together. In particular, in this work, we can see examples of the following strategies that Coleman outlines. Number one, developing processes that focus on altering parties' patterns of interaction toward constructive change, rather than focusing on specific outcomes. Number two, privileging emotions, which are central to decisions in addressing complex conflict and which are often elided to some extent in more linear processes. And number three, opening up the conflict to emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and structural complexity, which enhances the ability of those engaged in addressing the conflict to understand and communicate with others in more nuanced ways. We also see the following processes of systems-based conflict transformation in the work of Acting Together. Number one, working to complicate understandings of the conflict in order to enhance ways of addressing it. This disrupts our human drive for oversimplification, which exacerbates polarization and atomization. Instead, we work to identify patterns hidden by the complexity of the conflict. Second process, build up peace attractors and tear down conflict attractors. How? By disrupting conflict elements that are exacerbating other conflict elements, and by supporting peace-building elements that are enhancing other peace-building elements. Number three, third process, take advantage of opportunities for positive change, being mindful of the long-term dynamics of conflicts. Identify the small things that can be actioned. Although it can be difficult to identify and engage with control factors in a complex conflict, some of the results of these endeavors may be a tipping point. For example, the response of audience members in the Argentinian production of Fuente Ovejuna appears to be a tipping point for expressing resistance to all dictatorships. The actions that audience members that came to that play demonstrated inside the theater were also repeated outside the performance space in resistance to the Argentinian dictatorship of that time.
So, Polly, you've given us a little overview of systems theory, but can you just clarify what distinguishes systems theory approaches from other approaches to peace building? What's the real difference?
That's a very big question, but I can give you some of some of the central themes that might answer that question. We could probably spend a whole semester discussing that question, but in a very brief form, systems theory approaches are intended, as John Paul Lederach explains, to reach the simplicity on the other side of complexity. Systems-based approaches address the significant elements that exacerbate conflict, as well as those that support the creation and sustaining of a just peace, as well as developing a collective understanding of significant elements that shape violent conflict. It's very important to understand how each of these elements affect each other or shape each other. In developing this collective understanding of how the relationships between elements of an intractable conflict are keeping the conflict alive, then peace builders or artist peace builders can be much more strategic about how they draw on their resources, as well as how they communicate with funders and policymakers.
Who specifically do you think would make use of this tool and how?
I think one thing I'd like to just add sort of as a caveat is this tool is only a starting point. You know, a really rigorous systems theory-based analysis is collaborative. It's complex. It draws a lot of people together. And as Cindy said, it involves not only our intellect, but our bodies, our spirits, our emotions. So this tool is only a starting point. But what it provides is a very simple, I was trying to reach the simplicity on the other side of complexity, but a very simple introduction to systems theory. And then I've tried to ground that in practice examples from the Acting Together anthologies and documentary. But a group that wished to use systems theory approaches in a very intractable, violent, complex conflict would need to dive deeper. They would need either to work collaboratively with some peace builders in a workshop, you know, to workshop the conflict they're looking at, and or just draw more deeply on systems theory approaches. I just want to say this is just a starting point. It in and of itself, you know, can't stand alone. It's like an introduction to how powerful this work can be, and we can see it sort of walked out in the Acting Together project. Another point I'd like to raise, in addition to what Lee said, which I thought was very helpful, is I could imagine organizations making use of this too. We see, you know, large-scale projects going on all around the world, arts-based and cultural-based initiatives designed to address intractable conflict. But we don't often see them in dialogue and conversation with each other, trying to understand how, as a whole, they are either building these latent peace attractors or how they are disrupting conflict attractors. And so I could imagine a large-scale project that would bring together these initiatives and institutions and artists from all around the world and bring them into conversation to understand this much larger system as a whole, because we're not just concerned with peace in our area, you know, but conflict, violent conflict anywhere in the world affects all of us. So I think this has a lot of potential for either international or global organizations also.